to demo the Little Toy Guacamole. All I suggest is kind of one quick tool is if you have a whisk, it's a great way to get a chunky texture in your guacamole and literally just mashing straight up and down. So, I mean, that's the only kind of trick I have to offer. Hopefully everybody's made guacamole before in their life. A little background about me. I am originally entrenched in the sciences and then decided I wanted to follow my real passion, which is food, and I was able to find a career path that kind of matched up the two, where I was developing recipes and experimenting in the kitchen. And I did that work at America's Test Kitchen for Cooks Illustrated magazine. We then would spin those stories into scripts for America's Test Kitchen television and cross country television, and then also our NPR radio shows. So today, what I'm showing you is a way to make use of a really nice island product. Are all of you aware that we have farm shrimp out west in Keikaha? And so it's Kauai Shrimp Company, and they have a really superior product. In fact, I'd heard about it before I even moved here. My chef instructor at culinary school, who used to run a restaurant in Vegas, actually ordered it from Kauai because he liked it so much. So when I told him I was moving, he tipped me off to this product. One of the things about shrimp that I like is getting a little color on it. Have you guys ever tried to saute really hard your shrimp and you get browned edges and then you get rubbery shrimp, right? So this is a recipe that's trying to offer browned flavors, those roasted flavors, without drying out the shrimp. And so what we start with is shell-on shrimp. That's going to give us a little bit of a leg up in preventing it from drying out. When you have the shell, you can keep it in the oven longer. And so what I've done with these is I've removed the head. In Kauai, they come often head-on, shell-on. And up the back, all I've really done is split the shell and also split into the flesh of it. So that's going to give me a little bit of extra crevices for me to put flavors when I go to add my spices and all of that. Yeah.
How did you split it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll show you which one. Good question. So what I recommend is kitchen shears. That's always easiest to me. And so that way you can cut really cleanly through the shell.
Okay.
You can also kind of go back in and make sure that you cut the flesh too with that, or you can take a paring knife and make sure that you cut a bit more into the flesh itself. So that's one protection. One step is that we're going to account for perfectly tender shrimp by leaving the shell on. The second step is that we're going to brine it. And so who's brined a turkey before? Heard of brining a turkey before? Yeah? Okay, so the same concept exists with seafood, and a lot of people forget about that possibility. And what I'm creating here is in the ocean. And I recommend weighing. If all you do is work with volumes, here's two different volumes. You could be following a recipe and be using the wrong kind of salt versus what the recipe was written with, and end up with something twice as salty or half as salty as it should be. These actually weigh exactly the same. So you can be my confirmation there.
9. 9.
All right. So this is why we don't use volume. We use weight for salt. So a whisk is going to be a helpful tool for getting this to quickly dissolve. The reason there are so many different salts out there is that you sometimes want a really dense crystal, sometimes you want a really flaky crystal. For example, this is what I'm using here, is a lot of volume for the same amount of weight, which means it's going to dissolve quickly. If I'm working with a denser salt, like say rock salt, I'm just stirring here forever. And this
So what
is
kind of
cutting,
salt is it?
this is a kosher salt, and specifically diamond crystal. This is also kosher salt, but it's Morton brand. Okay, so this is coming into solution. You can see that there's no layer of salt floating at the bottom. And we'll add our cut up the back shell-on shrimp and put this in the refrigerator for just 15 minutes is all we need. So anyway, pretend it's 15 minutes later. We would dump that in a colander,
No, it's okay.
put it out on paper towels, and pat it dry. It's important to get as much moisture off as possible because, again, if we want browning to occur, we need the food to be dry. If we want those shells to get nice and crispy in the oven. Because the first thing, or really, browning occurs above the vaporization point of water, above 212 degrees. So if you have a bunch of moisture in there, the food can't begin browning until the surface dries out. So this is going to help expedite that. Next, what we're going to do is mix it with flavorful things. And we don't need salt because we've already done salt, but this is a mixture of olive oil, the zest of lemon. In this case, I use Meyer lemons. We have fabulous Meyer lemons up at the farm and all around the island right now. It's also plenty of garlic. And then really aggressive spices. I used roasted red pepper flake. And I also used anise seed. I like whole spices as much as possible, but since we're not going to have a long time in the oven, I didn't want a big, say, fennel seed, which is going to still taste kind of raw and untoasted in just, 5 minutes. So this way, if you all tried it, there are the little fresh seeds in there. Oh, and parsley. You could use a variety of herbs and spices. You can trade this out. That's less important. Oil is important. So if you wanted to just skip any of the other flavoring and just taste the pure shrimp, you could just toss it in oil after browning. Or melted butter. I used olive oil. My husband was asking, oh, did you use coconut oil? Because I often roast with that. If you have refrigerator temperature shrimp and you try to put coconut oil on it, you'll end up with really brittle coconut oil. So I don't know if any of you have tried to play with coconut oil below 78 degrees, it's brittle. So it'd be really hard to work that in. But otherwise, pick an oil that you like. And so these are coated, and what I'm trying to do as I toss these is make sure that I get some of that flavor into the shrimp itself and under the shell. And then what we're going to do is put it onto a rack, evenly laid out. Again, we want to make sure not to crowd this too much. So this is a half-size sheet. Some people own smaller sheets. Please separate this out into 2 batches. Don't overlap them or else they're going to steam instead of roast the way that we want. I also put it on a rack. So again, the moisture that is going to release from the shrimp is going to fall through instead of letting it sit there and steam or boil in its own juices. And all I've done is preheat the broiler. And the reason you don't want to use oven heat is that it will cook it will become overdone before you get color on it. We want the most aggressive heat element we can come up with, which is the broiler. And so we're going to roast these. Thank you. I love my assistants. We're going to roast these about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It totally depends on your home broiler, so this is somewhat difficult. But basically until we see color on the top of the shell, take it out, flip it, wait till we see color on the other side. And they look just the way that you guys have seen and have been eating. So I am going to finish this batch, but I'll open it up to questions from anyone. Questions just about
Is it the same procedure if you use frozen shrimp?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thaw it first. Most shrimp is going to come frozen, even the stuff that is thawed at grocery stores. The grocery store bought it frozen and then they just thawed it for you. And there's really nothing wrong with what's called IQF, individually frozen shrimp. And that's what you want to look for. It shouldn't look like a block of shrimp. If it's literally congealed into one big ice block, that means that it was frozen really slowly because they put the whole thing in. And the slower it freezes, the more damage there is to the muscle fiber. That's true for steak, that's true for chicken. And so what you want is an IQF product, individually frozen.
How about the one that said pre-cook and we still like boil it, flash broil it really fast?
Don't even bother. Yeah. Pre-cooked shrimp are always overcooked already. And then in order to add any flavor to them, you have to even more overcook them. And there's a big difference between adding your spices to something raw versus adding it to something already cooked. So you're not going to pick up as much of the garlic flavor, and you're going to end up with something that's overcooked. But one of the nice things, Alana I know was willing to try the shrimp shell and all. And what I like to recommend is at least trying that. But the shell has a lot of flavor in it. And in fact, it has the same carbohydrates, the same proteins that are in the flesh. So that's why it browns the same way that the shrimp would brown. And those flavors are all water soluble, so they can actually transmit from the shell into the flesh of the shrimp during cooking, which is why even when you peel it off, you get the benefit of it having been cooked with the shell on flavor-wise. But if you eat it with the shell, you're going to get that much more.
And you get calcium.
Exactly, I was just going to say that. And it tastes really good. Right. Oh. Also with ovens, a lot of people have uneven cooking ovens. This is actually perfect, but it's good to always rotate your sheet tray. I didn't need to because apparently this is a fabulous oven, but
Of course it is.
of course it is. But that's always a good idea whether you're baking cookies or a cake